Got it going. So like I was saying, if we could go through each page, one page at a time, and this, if you printed them off or saved a copy to your desktop, I've rearranged things to try and better organize it, so it might not match up exactly with what you have. But I will do a screen share. And so on this first page, I have the priorities, that we decided were health and safety of students and staff. And if somebody could kind of watch for if there's some new people joining in, I'd appreciate it. Quality education in school as much as possible, accommodations for students and staff who need them, and social distancing were our priorities. School plan is to begin as scheduled with in-person instruction on Monday, August 17th, to follow our calendar. The statement in there says masks are required for all K-12 students and staff as is reasonable and appropriate when social distancing is not possible. Sorry, I should say is not possible. I rewrote that statement so it sounded better. So we're going to be reasonable and appropriate if you can't social distance. Bancroft Rosalie will provide 2 masks for every student and staff member. I'm thinking maybe we might have to do more, but that's what we have right now. Uh-oh, somebody's saying they want in. Yeah, this isn't going to be good. I got 3 people want in.
If you make me a co-host, I can watch that.
Yeah, I got to remember how to do that. Over in the more, no. Over in the security, no. Where do I do that?
I think on my screen, if you click the 3 little dots in the upper corner of my image.
Your image? All right, you are now a co-host. Yeah, if you want to watch that for me. It's been a while since I've done this, so I forgot. Okay, so thank you. So I think that's probably going to be the one thing that people are going to want to talk about is masks required when reasonable and appropriate, as reasonable and appropriate when social distancing is not possible. I saw this was the Elkhorn policy and I liked it because it gives us some flexibility so that we're not right away saying, because situations are going to change, it's going to be impossible really to make football players wear masks if we're having football, right? And there's no way they're going to be able to social distance. So there's going to be times where we cannot require that sort of thing to happen. Educational risk categories, I did update this because Launch Nebraska came out with their recommendations and they went from 3 status to 4. And the green is the low risk, which we would have our regular school. Yellow status, minimal moderate community spread, where we would maybe make adjustments with our 7-12 kids, but try to keep the K6 in person. Orange stage, where it's moderate community spread. Again, trying to keep the K6 as much as possible in person, but not necessarily. I mean, if we had to go to some sort of a modified schedule, we could. But the idea here is until we're actually closed, trying to keep the little kids, at least the K2, moving forward and coming into school every day. Plus, I also put under significant community spread, students with special needs may continue with in-person instruction if the state allows us. I had Rachel Wise, the Department of Ed person on the board in our area, stopped in. We had a really good conversation about all of this, and she said that Illinois did what they called a soft close, where it was closed, but certain groups of high needs kids could still get access so that they would could, if you needed 15 minutes of speech and it was not going to be, that maybe isn't such a good example because Tony did a good job with that. Well, let's say that you needed particular life skills of some sort, or OT or PT that couldn't be done through distance learning, that they would bring those students in, or they had the option of bringing those students in, and I like that. So if we could get the Department of Ed to allow the special needs kids to still come in as long as they're not sick, that it wouldn't be a lot for us, probably a handful at best, but I think if we could, because those kids were really, really struggling with remote learning, couldn't even get some of them on. So if we could maybe do something like that, I'm hopeful that they'll allow that. So there you go, folks. That's page 1. I'm gonna send you into breakout rooms. Oh, do we want to say face coverings rather than masks to offer the option of face shields? Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because we do have 24 of those that were donated by Rosalie Fire and Rescue. So we've got the health provider shields, and Fremont Public Schools is making some in their with their 3D printer, and that they're selling really dirt cheap. So if we needed some of the, a little less expensive, but the ones we got are really, really good shields. So that's a good idea. Breakout rooms. I'm going to go 5, maybe. I'll put 4. Let's go 4. And 5 to 6 people per room. And I'm going to give you about 7 minutes to discuss the masks and or face coverings and the ideas as far as kids in their groups, depending on where we're at in the health department dial. So talk to you in about 7 minutes. Katie, did you not want to join a breakout room? Gina, everybody's in a breakout room talking about masks and the risk categories right now. So I think you're in the last breakout room, number 4. If you want to go ahead and join that one. I think it should have given you a choice to join it. So right now, the participants are all in breakout rooms discussing facial coverings, and they're going to be back in about 10 seconds with reports on what they discussed. So we'll be up and going here in a few seconds. Looks like we're all back. You remember what breakout number you were? What do we have for number 1? What was the discussion in breakout room 1?
I think that was us.
Okay.
We talked about not having to wear the face coverings if we are able to safe distance and all face the same way. And we mentioned that especially in the younger classes where those facial expressions and mouth movements, forming letters are important. So you need to see those. So we could see it that way. You know, we were split if it should be shields or masks. Some felt like it should be, you know, the shields would do the thing, and others felt like the mask would also do the thing. But we did think to educate how to use the mask or the face covering. If you saw the thing on Facebook with Target where they put up a mirror so people could try on face masks to see which one looks best, it kind of goes back to that. You know, kids need to know how to use the mask correctly to keep it being safe. And then the other thing we mentioned was the type of face mask. Are we going to have certain requirements? Is a handkerchief going to be considered a face covering? Or are we going to stipulate what it has to be? So, but that's pretty much what we said, I think. Did I miss something?
Okay. What do we got for group 2?
We talked about some of the same things that they already covered. Mr. Bridges brought up that he has read research that says that the bandanas are not as effective as regular masks. And we said that if we're not going to allow some of that kind of stuff, we probably better make an early decision so parents know what's what. I think Mrs. Henson talked about how are we going to have some like extras at school in case kids take them home and fail to bring them back. What else am I missing, guys? That must be it.
Okay. Sounds like
All right. Group 3, what'd you have?
All right, so our conversation kind of included the same thing with the face shields. We had a question of, there's a lot of research that says that a face shield is not enough to protect. It doesn't prevent stuff from spewing out, kind of like the bandana. It's not protecting all sides of your mouth. So if we are allowing face shields, just making sure we maintain that 6 foot of separation between the teacher and the students. Then also we brought up the point about students also, the teacher also needed to see the student's mouth move. And so are we going to have face shields available for the students as well, if necessary with certain teachers? So question was brought up, if we're requiring kids to wear masks in school, why are we allowing kids to play sports and not utilize masks during sports? Very valid question. My response was sports are an optional. Kids can choose to play sports. They don't have to. They're putting themselves at risk for certain injuries when they play football. Same thing with the sickness. They're just putting themselves a little bit more risk. But we're going to try to keep kids as safe as we can in school. Then the other question we had was, what are the biggest differences between yellow and orange? And what are going to be the determining factors for moving from yellow to orange?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I didn't explain that very well, but that's all going to be coming from the Logan Valley Health Department. They're going to tell us what category we're in. They're going to have a, my understanding is there's going to be a dial up on for each community that's in their area. And if they can do it, and it's going to be based on the number of cases, there's like 5 or 6 metrics. How many people have been diagnosed, all of these different metrics, and they're going to come up with a number or a color. And I don't know if you guys have been watching, but Lincoln moved from yellow to orange. And so there's an uproar now about whether they should, whether it's coming face to face at the beginning of the year is a good idea or not. So the health department's the one who's going to set that dial. And then, you know, what if you're just a little bit into yellow from green? I mean, I think we just got to say, if you're in yellow, we don't care if it's just a little in yellow. It's we're gonna be yellow. So moving categories, criteria. So we're gonna have to make sure we explain that real well to people, right? That's what I'm gathering out of that. Is there? Did I get all of them, or we got group 4 yet? Right?
We have group 4 yet. This is
Okay, go
Linda.
ahead.
We feel that maybe face masks or face shields are not what each family wants to choose. And so, or I guess we want them to be able to choose if they have a face mask or a face shield. And we realize that Bev had talked to Dr. Felber, and he had done had read some studies and stuff, but it feels that the face shields are 96% effective. And like she said, how do you determine if it's effective or not? And it's whether you use it appropriately and things like that, I'm sure. And are we going to also require them, if they wear a face shield, are we going to require them to still wear a mask? She said that in Lincoln, her granddaughter can wear a face shield, but she still is going to be required to wear a mask underneath of that face shield. And then the other question that came up was, if it's in phase 4, are masks still going to be required?
Are you talking about green?
That was Gina that brought that up. So if Gina's on here, if she could chime in and let us know how she wants that clarified.
You're talking about the green, right?
I think the green, if we're in the green, the lowest risk, are we still going to require, the face mask? She just wanted a clarification, and I'm sure she probably had somebody that had inquired about it.
Yeah, right. And my response is this, that, regardless of it, my perspective is, if our priority is having kids in school as much as possible, then we're going to have to be proactive about making sure that the things that the health department is going to ask when they communicate back to the families, or when they do contact tracing, that those kids that are possible exposures can answer in a way that keeps them in school. So if the question, and they have a series of questions that they're going to ask, how close were you to the person who's infected? How long were you next to them? Did you have a mask? And if they can say, I was close to them less than 10 minutes, and I was 6 feet away at all times, and I had a mask on, then there's nothing for them. They are not going to be quarantined. They're not going to have to stay home. If they say, I didn't have a mask and I was within 6 feet of them for I don't know how long, maybe could have been 5-10 minutes. Boom, they're going to set it home for 14 days. And so my feeling is I would prefer to err on the side of, if you just do this little thing, whether you can take it off when you're 6 feet away and in the classroom and you're being instructed. But if you do this little thing, then if somebody's sick in school, which at some point it's going to happen, probably.
I'm sure it is.
That you don't have to stay home. And we're not even sure what we're going to do if they're sick and it's the flu. And, the health department, our health department is being really aggressive on getting stuff out and giving us scenarios. Melissa and Gina over there are working on having a sheet of, here's what you do when this happens, here's what you do, here's what we're going to do. So I feel pretty confident that once we see their protocol, we're going to say, you know what, this is the best way to go to make sure that kids are able to come to school all day. So that's my own perspective, but
It seems like we need to find out what their view on face shields is then, because if
Yeah.
they don't think they're as good, then we're putting our kids at risk if we allow them.
Well, I got that question circled, and when I meet with them once a week to talk with them and the other superintendents in the area, and so I've got that circled as a thing to ask. What about face shields and for students too? So
I feel like the face shields came up when we had our last meeting. They said that they were not as effective as the masks, but they were an adequate protector, but not as protective as wearing the mask.
Okay. Dr. Cerny, I do see that there's a question in the chat thing
Yeah.
regarding face shields. Maybe you want to address that while we're on this topic.
Oh, you mean as far as like the sports one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. If you'll notice, the document says we're going to wait for the NSA guidance on that. And we're meeting Wednesday of next week to discuss what we're going to do. So whether they're even going to have sports. I assume the answer is going to be yes. I don't know if it'll be all sports, but I doubt if they're going to cancel girls golf. Football would be the one that I would think would be at question. I see Virginia today canceled their football season, but that's a long ways away and they're in a hot spot. So I'm guessing that's not probably going to happen as long as the governor still allows it with his directed health measures. I'm guessing that across the state, it's going to be a local community decision whether you want to participate. And my guess is there's going to be a lot of pressure in every community to have their sports programs. That's what I think is likely to happen. So I think we're going to have to talk about that. I don't really have an answer myself. If they're all 6 feet away from other groups, I think they're probably going to have a choice. But I'm not saying that we've ruled out already. There aren't any spectators except family, and we'll strive every game. Your family can come watch. The rest of you will watch from home. That is a very likely scenario that we can do to make sure that the people who, just like the state basketball tournament, those can be put on a list. We can check them in. But again, we're going to have some real coordination among the schools in the area as far as what they're going to do, because it's going to be really hard for me to tell our people they can't come to our games, but they can go to West Point's games, right? So those are all discussions that we're going to have to make as a group about what is best. And maybe the NSA will come out and say we're only going to go family only. I don't know, but right now they're the ones who are going to have that. Poor association is going to be the ones that are getting stuck with. Even the Department of Education has deferred to the NSA guidelines when it comes to school activities. The Department of Ed is staying out of it. So let's see here. Right. So you're asking me if how are we going to identify whether it's seasonal allergies or COVID or flu or common cold? And I know what the health department is going to tell us is if you're sick, stay home. If you've got a temperature, stay home. And they're going to say, if you've got a temperature and we've been looking at 100 degrees, if you're over 100, you're going to have to stay home X amount of days until you are no longer symptomatic. And I can't remember what she said, if it was 48 or 72 hours. It might be that if you have a 100-degree temperature, that you go home and you stay home until you haven't had a temperature for 2 days. And then
That's the way I understand it. It's 2 days. And then some schools, if it's above a certain degree, then they make them be fever-free for 72 hours, but then they have to have a doctor's note to come back to clear them so that we all know that they are safe to come back.
so
And I know it's an inconvenience to the parents, but we are a school, we're not the provider and we're not the parent, and it's the parent's responsibility.
yeah, so that's my take on it too, is the health department is going to tell us, is going to direct us that these are what we want you to do when the kids have these symptoms, and they're going to tell us, and we'll make sure the parents know. But I am the most guilty person about coming to school when I got a runny nose. I get, colds 2 or 3 times a year, and I never stay home sick. And I've already told myself that if I got a runny nose, I'm either going to mask and self-contain in my office all day, or I'm going to stay home. I mean, those are my only choices. Walking around, blowing my nose in a Kleenex and exposing other people in the school is just not acceptable behavior. Even if it's, even if I feel compelled to be at work, you're just going to have to realize that we're going to have to do things a little differently. Oh, here's a question about how are we going to manage kids who are trying to be funny and, maybe not taking it serious or acting like they're trying to get someone sick. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for that, but I'm going to write it down. Because you're right, the little ones they don't understand. And everybody, a lot of kids want attention, and sometimes they do behaviors to get attention, whether it's positive or negative. I'm guessing that we're going to do a really good job of teaching and reteaching, but at some point, we're going to have some consequences if it, especially if we're in yellow or orange. I mean, if we're in green and there's nobody sick in the area, I think it's, we want to do a lot of reteaching. But if we're in the orange, I don't think we got any room to I think that we've got to be pretty tough at that point. Okay, is there anything else? What I wrote was 6 feet. The discussions on facial coverings were, so 6 feet, no masks, as long as you can maintain social distancing. And I've even seen people talking about 3 feet, but I'm not ready to go there yet. I believe I saw that in one of the state documents. If your classroom sizes do not allow 6 feet, then no closer than 3 feet. But I didn't read carefully to see if there were masks involved at that point. Educate students. Yeah, we're going to try to do a really good job of that the first day of school, and every day really. What covering is okay? We're going to have to make decisions on that. And then face shields for staff and students, and whether that's an acceptable choice or not. Also, make sure that we get out criteria for moving categories is well explained. And then how we're going to manage classrooms with kids as far as maybe not taking it as serious as they need to. So I'm going to go on to page 2. I think I am anyway. We spent a lot of time on that one, but that was a tough one. Okay, so. Page 2 is about how we're going to deal with students. And again, it's not complete because I don't have all the information from the health department. Screenings, all students will be screened for temperature, cough, respiratory issues, and other general feelings of wellness. I would like to do that at the front door if I can, but I cannot guarantee that we will have somebody there every time a kid comes in. So in general, I just want to say we're going to screen kids. Parents are asked to check and log the student's temperature every morning and evening, and hopefully they will do it. One thing, the information that I got back from the Shrine game is that they had required parents to do that. They had the temperature check twice for those kids who were going to go play in that football game. And the parents did a really good job. They were all on board. They all agreed to do it. And of course, they wanted their kid to be able to play. And they did identify 2 students that were sick and they were not able to play in the game. And so they didn't even come. And I think that we all have to agree that we're going to make sure that kids who are running temperatures are going to be kept home. Students with symptoms, anyone who is sick needs to stay home, me included. Students and staff with a temperature greater than 100 will be sent home and allowed to return to school 48 hours after they are fever-free or with a negative COVID test or with a doctor's note. Doctor's note can rule out anything. The student will be quarantined if they are in, I should probably explain that. If we determine that they are sick here at school, we're going to quarantine them in the isolation room with a mask on until they're picked up from school. Students and staff who have 3 or more symptoms consistent with COVID-19 will be sent home and allowed to return, same thing, 48 hours after symptom-free with a negative COVID test with the doctor's note or with approval of the local health department. And that wording is in there now, not having it specifically from the health department. So if they come up with something different, that would be revised to reflect how they're looking at things. Safety procedures, hand washing, hand sanitizing. Students and staff will wash or sanitize hands upon entering the building and when entering, leaving classrooms or restrooms. So we're having, right now we're getting sanitizer stations created. I hope that we will have, if we leave this statement in, I hope that we have enough stations ready. Clark Peterson is making these little stands so that we can have them all over the place, and hopefully people will be able to sanitize when they leave classrooms and restrooms. And kids are going to have to be educated because I will be in the restroom and going to wash my hands, and a kid will walk out of the bathroom, no hand washing. I mean, we're just going to have to make sure that when you see that, you got to say, hey, back here, wash the hands. Drinking water, we're going to shut the fountains off. Everybody needs to have a water bottle and they can use the filling station. We might have to look at adding another water filling station or 2, but no shared faucets or fountains. We're going to clean frequently. I didn't put down anything specific just because I didn't want to tie us into this bathroom has got to be cleaned every 2 hours. We're going to do it as frequently as possible. Matt's already got a special device that he wants to try out this week that will ionize. I don't know if you guys understand this, but it'll ionize the droplets so that they'll stick on surfaces, and so you won't have to worry about missing anything. All those droplets are going to cling onto it. It's around $4,000, not including the product, but that way they can come in and spray the room, spray the locker room, spray the classrooms, and everything will have that disinfectant on there. It'll make sure that we can get to those areas more frequently because we're not going to try to scrub the surfaces. We're going to spray the surfaces when those kids are not in there. Social distancing guidelines followed as much as possible while students are in schools, classrooms, elementary students kept in homerooms as much as possible. Commingling of students limited. I don't know, maybe that's a controversial thing. I don't know. That's how I feel it's going to be best to make sure that those kids are not going to be quarantined because they're not going to be around. We're going to minimize the number of kids that they're going to be around. Secondary student classrooms arranged to limit the number of shared classrooms to the degree possible. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to look. I'm working on it now. Mrs. Nolting has given me the numbers of people in each classroom, and it's possible we might have to move people around to make sure that we can keep that 6 feet separation, and that maybe all the 7th graders will be in one room and the teachers will move. I mean, that's something we're looking at. And then lastly, once we get the exposure response protocols from the health department, they'll go in here. And that's hopefully she gets them done by next week so we can spend all the time talking about that. So let's jump into a breakout room. And you guys can have about eight minutes to discuss these. Pick out what you are interested in, and we'll come back together. So I hope you got the invitation to join the breakout room. All you got to do is click on that and it'll put, I think you're in breakout room number 4. That everybody? Okay, who's handling group one? What would you like to talk about? I think I got 5 things on there. What do you feel like talking about?
It's me again. Mostly the temperature checks is what
Okay.
we focused on.
Okay,
One of the questions was, is there going to be a consequence for sending your kid, doping your kid up so he doesn't have a temp and then sending him to school so he can say he didn't have a temp when he left home, and then 2 hours later we have some kid that's sick. The other thing would
Does anybody
be,
have a solution for that?
no, they did not. Or not picking their kids up.
A
When we
verbal
call and say
reprimand?
they're sick and nobody comes to get them. You know, we mentioned that before. Are there going to be consequences?
And
Um,
this is Linda. Are we going to kind of have a guideline for, you know, what's going to be considered acceptable? Because honestly, I'll have people that will wait 3 and 4 hours to come and pick up their student that is ill. And so, I mean, is that still going to be acceptable, or are we going to look at a shorter time, you know, that someone, whether it's the parent or grandparent, a neighbor, whoever, needs to be there maybe within 30 to 45 minutes, you know?
One of the other things we mentioned was doing their temp before they got on the bus, having a station in Rosalie and having them temp check there. And then if they were sick or running a temp, they wouldn't be allowed to get on the bus.
Yeah,
That would be an option they talked about. Are we going to have different start times? Because when those buses unload and come through those front doors, are you going to be able to temp that many kids and go through your protocol questions and have them in class at 8:15? Is that going to be? Or do we think about letting elementary come in through the elementary doors and do their temp on that side and keeping the middle school and high school on the west side? Was another option they threw out there. Or maybe staggered start times. So you let your little kids come in first and then have your middle school and your high school come in. Other things we talked about was maybe having teachers move instead of classes, and then having directional movement. You know, it's a one-way hallway and you can only go down certain steps and up certain steps. And I know that was something you had talked about before, Dr. Cerny, trying to keep the direction so you're not meeting people in the hall. Did I get everything or did I miss something? That's
okay,
it.
room
then.
2. Which one of you guys is taking that on?
We talked some too about the temperature screening and how that was going to work, and about making sure people stayed home. I'm drawn. I think ours was pretty similar, wasn't it, guys?
I asked the question on those kids that are going to P2T, if they still have actual traveling to West Point, are they going to have to get temp checked when they come back after interacting with students from other schools? Just something to think about.
This is
Oh, yeah.
Linda. I
We
kind of
also
feel
said
that,
screenings would be really important because that's not the only symptom.
and I kind of feel that if they leave our facility, when they come back, we need to rescreen.
Okay.
That's my 2 cents worth.
Has P2T put out any paperwork on how they'll handle this for their program?
The meeting on that is, I have it down somewhere. We're meeting August 6th, so not for a while.
Is it possible that some of that could be DL? I mean, like the education classes, do they really need to be physically present?
No, they don't. They don't. I think
I
it
mean,
could be done.
I get it for welding, you kind of got to be there, but the ones that don't have to, I wonder if they would consider DL in it for this year.
Anything else on that group 2? Room 2? Okay, moving on to room 3. Who's the spokesperson for that one?
We talked quite a bit about the screening and how that would work. We also brought up, can students be screened in Rosalie for those students before they get on the bus? Kind of brought up the point of the bus driver not wanting to be responsible for that. So then if we send another adult over, that maybe that's a way to make that work. So have somebody drive over to Suburban, screen students, the bus can take those students, and if need be, that person waits until the kid gets picked up. If we have enough manpower for that. We brought up using multiple doors for screening. Just think that it might be a pileup of kids, especially when the bus comes. If we want to social distance as much as possible, I think doing that screening might cause kids to pile up in the morning. So if we could maybe have 3 designated locations, elementary students go in one door, 7 through 9 go in one door, 10 through 12 in another, something like that, where we try to divvy out where students are going. It'd be easier to run through screening with those students, just because you'd have a smaller list of kids to try to record for. Question came up of what time are we going to open?
Yeah.
What time is going to be allowed? What if parents lie? Kind of already been talked about. What if parents send their student to school with giving them Tylenol so they can no longer run the temperature? We also talked about masks and how are we going to make sure that kids are washing them or cleaning them so they're not contaminated. So talked about maybe having to pick up student masks at school and be responsible as a school for getting those cleaned every day. I think that's about it. If I forgot anything, somebody in my group can speak up.
Okay, room 4.
Okay, we also had a lot of discussion regarding the screening. Everyone in our group really felt that the temperature checks need to be done at school, and preferably before they get on the bus. There was concern of the bus driver, is he also responsible for taking the temp, but he also needs to focus on his driving responsibilities. So what's happening back behind him? Is so-and-so taking off their mask and messing with somebody else or whatever? So we kind of wondered if there could be like a bus monitor on each bus to help kind of make sure that everybody's doing what's expected of them, and to also help take the temps before they are on the bus. And then we also wondered if there's still just going to be one point of entry. And I explained that, we kind of talked about that a while back, but it hadn't really been written in stone yet, because at one point we kind of considered having the elementary go to that east door to prevent the bottlenecking in the front door. Let's see, and there is a question, they were wondering, do the parents, when they drop their students off at the Bancroft or Rosalie building, should the parents wait there in case the student has a temp and needs to go back home, so that there's not somebody standing out there waiting for a parent and it's time for the bus to leave and the bus driver doesn't have a monitor or whatever? We felt okay with the symptoms, and especially the staying home for 48 hours and having a doctor's note to return. Sanitizing stations, we felt okay about that. Water bottles, some of them had a concern about that. Are we going to allow them to choose their own water bottle? to their liking, whether it works good with their mask or with their face shield or whatever, or are we going to recommend a specific type for them? And then there was another question that says, what about the temp checks on all teachers? And all of us that enter the building now already, we already take our temp every time we enter the building, and I don't see that changing. So for the parent that asked that, I feel that, we need to do exactly what we expect our students to do. And so when we go in now in the front door, there's the thermometer and the login sheet, and answer a couple questions, yes or no, and then we can enter the building and go in and wash our hands right away. So hopefully that answers the question for that parent question that's up right now.
Can I jump in quick? I forgot one thing from group 2.
Sure.
It was mentioned that if we're going to have them fill their water bottles, we could probably use some more water filling stations, that it'd be really inconvenient and probably not even that safe to have the kindergartners come all the way from the kindergarten to the high school end of the building to fill their bottles.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that I didn't hear that I talked with kids about, I asked the volleyball girls the other day, what if you guys didn't use your lockers? Would that be a huge inconvenience to you? And their response was, the locker room, or the lockers in the hallways are not that big of a deal. The locker room lockers are the ones that they really keep the girls keep their stuff in there. And so they just, my thought was, transitioning between rooms, what's going to slow up or cause people to be near each other for longer periods of time. I know they only get 3 minutes, but when they got to stand there and get in their locker for things. And I'm thinking, and then do we disinfect lockers every day? Do we have to open those things up, spray them? What if kids could carry things in their backpacks with them? I wonder if that's not going to be easier to, when you're walking down the halls, then you follow the arrows, stay to the right side, don't bunch up and just go from place to place that you need to get to. I mean, we could stagger transition times really easy. Maybe that's something that we don't need to utilize is the regular hall lockers. I don't, when we clean them out at the end of, when I'm looking, there's either nothing in them or people have stuff in there forever and they never take them out. It's not very often. There's a few that have really fancy fixed up lockers where they keep everything separate, but they just asked, well, what about, then will our books be available for us in the classroom? And that was a question where I think I'm going to have to ask teachers, can we do that without kids, having to sharing books? Is it possible to store them in the classroom without other people, without everybody touching other people's things? So,
Dr. Cerny,
yeah.
I know that, like in my classroom, I don't let the kids, unless they check the books out, take my books out. So mine are always left in the classroom. But I know this summer I've been going through and I've been trying to find PDFs that either are the same as the chapters that I have, or at least close to what that chapter was teaching, so that it's just on their computer versus, I mean, if they want to use a book, I still have the books, but this way they can find the stuff pretty much the same way on the computer. So
yeah, that's what I'm hoping, is that we'll have a lot of teachers say, well, you know what, I can keep those books in my room for them and they can access them when they need them. But you're right, having a digital copy so that they can just look at their computer. You're right, there are some that got to have that book. Yeah. I know there are, but I think a lot of them would prefer a digital copy.
And John, honestly, when I take around stuff for like the boosters and to put in lockers, there are very few kids with much more than the booster stuff in their locker. So, yeah. I mean, they really don't have anything hardly in their lockers.
And I even told them, and I'm not really considering this, but I reminded them of when we built the new gym, that the football and volleyball girls all had to go home after practice and change because we didn't have a locker room for almost until Christmas that year. And I know Brian Himmelbrock, Derek Archer, Clint French, the kids all just loaded their stuff up and took it home every night and washed it. And I mean, if we get into the orange phase, you know, maybe that's something we're just going to have to say, guys, we can't, you know, we just think it's best if you just take your stuff home every night. They should anyway, but they don't. They leave it set in there for weeks at a time and it stinks. Football guys, I'm thinking about. But, you know, just take your stuff home and go shower at home. I mean, we've done it before and nobody complained because that's what we had to do to get by. I think we could do it again if we had to. Did I get all the rooms? Well, you guys want to quit going, or do you keep going, or do you want to quit and pick up again later?
Well, I had a question.
Yeah.
Is it a possibility for the teachers to move class to class so the students can be more stable in one area?
I think we're gonna look at that. The one things that are going to be problems would be the shop classes. I think in 7th and 8th grade, it's very possible, other than maybe in math, some of the kids, we have, you know, some 8th grade kids that might be in with sophomores in that case. But on most of in junior high, all the other things would be possible to have it in one room and rotate. Science labs would be an issue because, you know, they need that lab equipment and that we're not going to be able to move that around a lot. So the science room might not be the case, but for like English and social studies and that, if the splits came out right, those kids might not have to move around so much.
I think that would be more sufficient, especially if you're going to be, you know, keeping them out of the hallway lockers, so they're not needing to, you know, haul their book. Because a lot, like with my girls, I know they had a lot of books. They had like 2 bags at one time. They were hauling. That we would, when we pick them up, they'd have 2 bags going, both filled with books. And if the students can be more stable to one class area, you know, they're not needed to haul those up and down the hallway every day, every hour.
Yeah, I think we're going to look at that and see how that might happen.
Montel, this is Linda, and I have weighed some of those book bags or those from those students, and they should not be any more than 10% of that student's weight. And there were some of those kids last year that honestly, their book bags were nearly 40 pounds. I think they had everything plus the kitchen sink in there. And it's like, oh my, you've got to get something out because it's going to end up hurting your back.
Well, I'm going to move forward with page 3 because I think a lot of the big questions have been answered on quality learning. You know, if we have to go to remote learning, we're going to follow our virtual learning policy. I'm looking at updating a few things. The special ed section wasn't elaborated on very well. Attendance, we're going to planning on taking attendance based on, and I'm thinking now if families want an opt-out, a remote learning option, what are some things that we can do? I see Lincoln Public Schools has said that if they don't feel safe coming, they can choose to remote learning. So I'm kind of putting some things in here about what that might look like. Attendance, if you're not in on the Zoom meeting when it's being held, you're absent. And that's the agreement that we're going to have is that you cannot get a job and work and then Zoom at night. You're going to follow if you're going to take the remote option, you're going to follow our schedule, or you're going to be absent and you're going to fall into our chronic absenteeism policy. I think we got to make sure that we maintain as much of a stable learning as we can. Internet access should not be a problem. I've talked again tonight, and we think we can get every family, just about every family who lives in our district, for sure, school internet access through MiFis or antennas. Everybody will have a device. We think we could even get 4-year-olds devices, even though they might not need them for remote learning, but we should have some that we can utilize there. And I think kids should take their devices home every night, because we never know what might happen. So I don't want to all of a sudden get a call from the health department, hey, you've got exposure, blah, 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 and we're going to close your school for a day like we did this last time, and have to get kids out really quickly. And I want to just make sure, I mean, I'm not going to check them, and like, it's going to be like Walmart, you know, you walk out and the person looks at you, and they're not going to check your bag every time, but it'd be a good idea if they did. And normal grading practices. So we're not going to stop grading every day. However you normally would grade will be followed. Preschool, I'm thinking self-contained, in-person at the little school, regardless of risk category, until of course we're in the red, and maybe even, and following Nebraska directed health measures for child care facilities. Because those 3 and 4-year-olds are not compulsory attendance. It's important that they get those experiences, but I feel like that we can be, since they're choosing to send them, we're not telling them they have to, that we could, maybe the interactions with kids, they might be able to interact more and have more freedom to play and be within 6 feet. But I'm just throwing that out. Maybe the preschool parents feel differently. Accommodations, any staff and students with verified health conditions, we will work to provide accommodations. Accommodations will be determined by a 504 planning team with those with health concerns. Staff accommodations will be determined by a conference between that staff and administrators to decide how we're going to best do it. And parents will have the option for remote learning. That's one you might want to talk about, but maybe there won't be the people that won't like that, but I think there's going to be 10% across the country, maybe more, of parents who will just say, until I know it's safe, I'm going to keep my kid at home and I'll help them. At that point, I think we need a written learning contract to say, these are the expectations. You're going to Zoom in at this time, or you're going to do all of the assignments that are given and return them by the due date, etc., to make sure that we have a common understanding of whose responsibility is what. Elementary recess, we will spread them out as much as possible. I'm saying playground equipment, one homeroom per day will be allowed on the equipment. So it might be 2nd grade gets playground equipment today for recess. I'm thinking that teachers or their para will take them out into designated area, and those kids will play together, having some sort of an activity. Maybe it's we're going to take a long walk for 20 minutes. You know, maybe try to do some activities where they're not, you know, touching each other and being really close. I don't like certain games they play anyway, so some of those things are fine with me. If indoor recess is necessary, we're going to need to rotate the gyms or have passive activities in classrooms. Now I'm talking about when we get to, you know, if we're in the yellow and orange, where we're really going to be tough. I mean, it might be possible that kids will just have to be in their rooms and doing some activities if we can't find places for them. After school program, the DIN will begin operating on Monday, March 24th. Homerooms will be able to participate in after school program activities. Tim and I are going to talk about this tomorrow. Every other day, a schedule will be developed and made available to parents each week. So it might be kindergarten, a 1st grade group, 2nd, 4th, and 6th will have the DIN today. They'll stay in there. The kids who want to stay will be in their classrooms, and we will have one of our DIN staff have an activity for them in their classroom. No commingling. If we're not going to commingle during the day, we're not going to commingle after school with the elementary kids. And after school study hall in the library for kids 7, 12 who are behind, we're not going to give that up because that's fairly important. I don't know how much you want to talk about those. Can I give you like 6 minutes? Will that be all right? That's my plan anyway. And there you go. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, who's got room 1? Is that you again, Lori, or somebody else doing that one?
Yes, it is me.
Okay.
One of the questions we had was, especially in the high school, where if we're not staying in the same room, are teachers going to be expected to wipe down all the desk and hard surfaces in between classes each time? Would be one question. Another question was, in the afternoon for specials, how is that going to work? Will the teachers still have time to do one-on-one with their kids while the other kids go to specials, or will specials come to the classroom? So, what are you thinking in that area?
Okay.
And then the other question we had was about after-school program. Will family units be able to be in the den on the same day? Amber mentioned that if you split it up, her 2 boys will be in the den different days.
Okay.
And that's pretty much what we talked about.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that first one. But I think that in answer to the elementary specials, I don't think the elementary kids come on this side and go past the cafeteria. I think they stay on that side of the building, and the high school kids, other than the ones that are going to the shop. And if we can, when the weather's nice, maybe they just need to come through the lower entrance and go that direction. I know I've always told them they can't, but I think they would rather go down out the doors, up the steps, and walk in through the outside. I think if we can keep the elementary kids over there and take stuff to them, that's probably that's the easiest way to prevent any commingling. Den units together, yeah, we'll have to look at that. That's a good question. I mean, it's possible that we could try to keep them as much as we can once we know who all's coming. Room 2. Who's that? Anybody?
We're clarifying, wanted some clarification on the den policies too. You said that each grade is going to be separate. Was that?
Could.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the rooms, the whoever's room is, I'm going to have 5 or 6 people, so I can have 5 or 6 classrooms. Now, maybe nobody in a particular, maybe no 6th graders want to come, then that means the 5th grade and the 4th grade get to come more often.
And then too, we thought there might need to just be a policy that said, if you don't feel safe enough to come be face-to-face for education, you probably shouldn't be face-to-face for extracurriculars either.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything, group 2?
Okay, group 3.
So we talked about also what Mrs. Ross just said is kids that don't attend school probably shouldn't attend extracurricular events. That got brought up in our group. Making sure that kids that are choosing to stay home and Zoom are having the exact same expectations as kids in the classroom. So there's not a difference there. A concern was brought up about how are teachers going to monitor both kids in the classroom and monitor kids remote that are learning remotely through Zoom. I think that's a valid concern. A suggestion that Karen made was utilizing staff who can't be in the building due to health issues. If there's certain staff that could help do some more of the online stuff with the students that are also doing online learning. Be a great way to keep those staff on payroll. A question was brought up, if kids stay home in the fall, they choose to stay home in the fall, but then all of a sudden winter sports roll around, they want to play a winter sport. We're going to let them opt in and out of when they want to be in school and when they want to be at home. And then the last question that was being discussed as the time ran out was, what are those rules that we're going to come up with for kids that choose to opt out, but then decide that they're okay to come back? Are we going to have a set time period, like by quarter, or are we going to let students kind of come and go as they feel? Could become a logistical nightmare if every other day a kid decides to learn from home. So
Yeah, I think a contract needs, and I don't know if I need to have a lawyer draft something for us. I've mentioned that. No one's really said that they were going to do it for all schools, but I think we got to have something in writing that explains all the expectations and some of the things you said. So when, for how long? So that it can't be, oh, I want to go to the game on Thursday, so I'm going to come to school. But yeah, we can't have people gaming the system. I don't think anybody would. I would hope not, but I don't think any parents would go for it. But I think kids will always try something. So, is there one more room? Room 4?
Yes, room 4. We were wondering, as far as the preschool and the den, are they going to come up to the big school for the den activities? And I kind of thought if they're already self-contained, that it would probably be a self-contained den program or after school program down there also. And then we also wondered about the specials. Is the teacher going to move to the classrooms and to prevent the hallway traffic and the commingling and things like that with other classrooms? And then we also felt that if they were remote learners, that if they choose not to attend in face-to-face, they should not be given the opportunity to participate in activities, and they should not attend any school functions. That you're either all in or you're all out.
Dr. Cerny, would the kids that are in quarantine be able to Zoom, I'm assuming, online for classes to be in attendance still if they have to be home, say 14 days or 10 days or?
According to our policy, yes. If they attend, assuming they're not too sick, if they set in on the Zooms and get their work done, they should be counted as present. By us, anyway. We're going to count them that way. I don't know what the health department's going to say, but we're counting them as being in school. I'm missing some questions here in the chat. Yeah, the den would not be available every day.
There was a question regarding utilizing student helpers / teachers in the elementary side.
That's a big no.
Okay.
No, I don't see any kid in. I think the policy needs to be, you stay in the room that you're assigned, no getting out. You can't go be an aide in some elementary classroom if you're a high school kid. And I know people aren't going to like this, but I don't see elementary kids sticking around and chasing basketballs after school for the high school kids either. I mean, they're just going to have to maintain. And the reason I say that is that if there's an elementary kid, if there's an exposure in the elementary and kids can't come to school, that's going to seriously, if they got to stay home for 14 days or worse yet, it's in the family and kids have to stay home until that person is well and then set out 14 days. It could be 3 weeks to a month that some of those kids are gone. In elementary kids, that's not good. A high school kid, a junior, senior, they're going to be fine. They'll be able to do their work. They're not going to miss out on crucial skills that those elementary kids will. And so I think we got to be really protective to make the situation such that we're going to minimize the chance that those kids will have to be quarantined. The elementary kids I'm talking about, and it's
So no
particularly
student managers.
so that they can, for all the elementary, we've got to minimize their exposure because I want them in school every day. I don't want anybody getting sent home, and I don't want to have to, and I don't want to, you know, have large numbers of kids gone because it's hard to catch them up. And in secondary, it's not quite as bad because they're going to be able to get their work caught up. They're better independent learners. And so there's going to be a few people that are not going to be happy, but look, the elementary, stay on your side, stay with your cohort group, your homeroom. Secondary kids, we're going to have to allow some commingling just because of the nature of the thing. But if we can prevent the commingling between the two groups, all the better yet. I know it's getting late. Do you want to? The back page is really very simple. Very simple. It is food service. I've already talked to Sean about grab and goes. It might not be the hot meal that they're accustomed to, although it could be if she uses styrofoam containers. Kids can come in, grab it, go to whatever room or table that they're assigned to eat their breakfast before school. I'm not really sure about time to allow kids in yet. I know that parents, the issue for me is that if they've got to drop their kid off at let's say 7:30 at a daycare, and then the kids have to come up here at 8. So we're exposing them to 2 sets of people instead of 1. I'm not exactly sure how I want to deal with that yet. So if anybody has any ideas, I know Pender is telling them you can't be in the building before 8 o'clock, but they're likely to be exposing those kids to more kids in the daycare, commingling kids at a daycare for a half hour that you might be able to prevent. So I'm still mulling that one over. And where they go if they do get in early. Lunch in the cafeteria, wherever it is, no self-serve items. You get what's on your tray, and we might have to put tables up in the commons. We might have to allow kids to eat in the big gym. I mean, if we can spread kids out, all the better. Probably in their little groups. Elementary especially will spread out 6 feet apart and eat in their little groups. I'm thinking of K1 and 2 in the classroom because it's a pain anyway with those, for kindergartners, it takes them forever to get through lunch line. It's going to be a lot quicker if we just give them a styrofoam container in their room and let them eat and figure out how we're going to monitor them during that time. Transportation routes, setting and assigned seats in family groups, masks if they can't be kept 6 feet apart. We got 40 kids, I think, right now. If we can talk the people who drive their kids to Rosalie to being paid mileage to drive them to Bancroft instead, that reduces our numbers on the bus down to a number where we can almost get by with 1 bus. If we go with 2, we're going to have less than 20 kids on each one. So there'll be easily social distancing there in that case. Vans, I don't know how. I mean, if we're taking kids to P2T, I'm guessing we're going to have them all in masks while they're riding over there. I mean, maybe we could take a bus, but in social distance. But right now, I'm looking at vans, and I think in Lions we have maybe 2 kids that would go over for the ag. Hopefully, Mr. Anderson would do that DL. No field trips first semester. I think we can keep everything to second. There's only 2 of them anyway. School activities following the NSA guidelines may be canceled at any time based on the Logan Elkhorn Valley Health Department. Attendance may be limited depending on the status of the school and the health measures in place, and all activities broadcast on Strive to the extent possible. So maybe junior high games even. we'll try to get as much as we can. I know we can't probably do a cross-country meet, but I think if you go to a cross-country meet, you're social distancing anyway. So some of those things are okay, but if indoor things, we'll try to do as many as we can. Visitors, no unnecessary visitors in the building. Authorized visitors must have an appointment, and no school facilities available to outside groups. I know the little kid programs are not going to be happy, but I haven't heard from them if they're even happening. So I'm giving you a short 5 minutes on this one, and then we'll meet and be done with the draft. Oops, I hit the wrong button. I about canceled it right there. So hold on. Okay. Okay. I kind of lost a few people. Group one, what do you got?
We talked about lunch spills. If we're going to eat in our classrooms, there was some concern about, especially with elementary, how many spills there would be on the carpets and messes on the carpets, just because little ones and big ones tend to do that. The other thing we talked about was if teachers are going to be responsible for being with them, with their kids during recesses and those extra times, what about the burnout rate for teachers and kids if they have no breaks during the day? You know, teachers are willing to do that, but it's just something to keep in mind that could be a problem. And then the other thing was social distancing on buses that are going to ball games. You know, we had 30 volleyball players. Are we taking 3 buses to get all the players to a ball game? Or we're going to assume that they're taking the risk and know the risk, and so we'll put 2 kids to a seat on a bus. But that's what we got discussed. Anything else from my group?
Okay,
I
what do you
think
got in
you
group
kind of
two?
covered it there.
What do you got, group 2?
We talked about what the policy was going to be on outside food being delivered, like from Rudy's or from your mom, your boyfriend, or whoever that gets dropped off at the door. Are we gonna? Is that going to be okay?
Yeah. I don't like it, but I mean, it's just, you know, what I think it, in my mind, I say, is that necessary? Is it necessary, or is it a convenience? And if it's a convenience, can we do without it?
That's kind of what we do, but we were just thinking there needed to be a set policy for
Right,
everybody so that
right.
some kids aren't getting it and other kids are not.
Could
I
we
think,
have
I think they could still bring a lunch from home. It's just the delivery's going to need to go.
Yeah, well, and some of them, quote, forget their lunch, and then it just so happens that somebody shows up with a foot-long sub right at lunchtime that's, you know, toasted and wonderful. And I don't know. I'm not sure that's if that happens on a regular basis. That seems kind of not fair to the kid who used to order from Rudy's.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, everybody's the rules are going to be a little different, and I think if people just got to adjust. Anything else, Sarah, on that? On 2?
That was the thing.
What about 3?
All right, for our group, one of the things that we talked about that maybe is a solution for buses is to provide disposable masks for students getting on the buses. I know we talked about it being too big of a cost to do it for everybody, but is it possible to do it for, if it means running 1 bus versus running 2 buses, it might be more cost effective to provide that mask every day and then be safer that way. So suggestion that Katie brought up, which I thought was a pretty good suggestion. Lunches, are they going to still be provided for students doing remote learning? So kind of like we're doing now, we're going to have a pickup for Bancroft and Rosalie, or just in Bancroft, or how's that going to work?
I mean, it would be easy to do it at Bancroft.
That was my answer too, but
Rosalie, not so easy.
Requires somebody to run them over there every day.
Yeah.
And then we also had one more question. How is it going to be communicated when we go from like green to yellow to orange? How often could that happen? Could it happen daily? And how is the notification going to take place?
Yeah.
And I believe the health department said they're going to release weekly. Is that correct? Weekly.
That's what I heard. That's
Yeah.
what I heard.
So they talked about releasing weekly based on the data from the previous week. So, and I think the superintendents came up with Wednesday maybe as being the day that the information was going to get released.
Yeah.
So Wednesday, you're not going to find out until Wednesday what the previous week's numbers were in your area. So not ideal that that information can be provided faster, but they also need time to tabulate everything.
Yeah, chase down contacts. What about room 4?
We were kind of on the same page as everybody else. We were just wondering about the food items that are delivered to the school. And as you all were giving your input, I kind of feel like maybe they need to have a documented health issue in order to have outside food brought in, just to help contain and isolate, and just overall everybody has to follow this unless you have a documented health issue, you know. And there are students that have documented health issues that obviously have to have, you know, certain food items. But just because you forgot your lunch, and like Rhonda said, then a sub all toasted shows up and stuff, is that really necessary? You know, our kitchen staff, I'm sure if you forgot your lunch, would be happy to make you a peanut butter or a cheese sandwich, or offer you the hot lunch for the day. And we could even take that out of the Mrs. Munderloh fund to pay for it if they forgot their lunch and couldn't pay for it, you know, type of a thing. But I think we need to just limit what's coming in just as much as we're limiting the outside visitors and things like that. We just have to make sure everything is safe. Otherwise, everything else had kind of, you know, has been touched on already. They were wondering about, for kindergartners, could they have at least the east entrance available for parents to drop off, if nothing else, for the first month, just to get them settled in their daily routine. But we need to set exact time limits of, you probably shouldn't have your student picked up or dropped off at 7:30 because no one's going to be there. But don't do a drop off and drive away type of a thing. You need to wait until their temp has been checked. So if you want to sit in the east parking lot with your student until the person checking the temps over there can check it, because I know, you know, we can't expect Mrs. Stanek to be there at 7:30 every morning just because she knows that so-and-so is going to be dropped off there. The parents have to be responsible and follow the guidelines that are set by the school for drop-off times. Because there's times I get to school at 7:15 in the morning and there's already a half a dozen kids sitting out in the dark in the entrance area. And so we kind of need to, you know, stay within those, you know, stated times for drop-off in the mornings especially.
Okay. So on the food issue, as far as, so we think that we qualify for all kids eating free. We've submitted our application. So there should be, and if we qualify for that, that means every kid, regardless, we think we're going to hit 50% free lunch so there should be no qualms about a kid. Now that doesn't mean you can have 2 hamburgers, but hold on, I got some chat questions. So that doesn't mean you can, I mean, you're not going to be able to get seconds. You'll have to pay for that, but you should be able to, every kid should be able to eat if we get this. We haven't heard for sure yet that I know of. I have considered for a while allowing Mrs. Stanek the option of, you know, there are sometimes the kindergarten parents want to walk their kids in the first day or two. And I thought, well, she has a door to her room. If she wants to temp check them there and let them walk them, I don't want them parents walking their kid in and to the door. The kids enter there. If the kindergarten, if we want to make that available to them, you know, there is an access there. I'm not sure yet. I wanted to talk to her about that, to see if that's something we want to do or not. Because I know they want to walk those little kids to the room in kindergarten. They want to see them off and watch them walk in the door. And that's the only way I see doing it, without having people tromping through the building.
I know Mike Nodelman and I were talking in our group maybe a time or two ago. I am completely fine with that because I don't want to take that moment away from the parents, but I do agree that we have to modify it. I meet them at the door, have a little spot we can take our picture, you know, they can watch them walk in, and that's kind of the best of both worlds, I think.
Okay. Regarding the teacher burnout in the elementary, one thing that I've thought of is, you know, if teachers are going to lose some of their planning time that they normally would get because they might have to, depending on whether they have a para or not, they might have to watch their own recess, that we might start the den early on some days for that class. So the den activities might start, you know, an hour and a half, or maybe 2:30 or so, or 2 o'clock, and have the den people watch them so that teacher once a week might get out at 2. So we can schedule some of that thing depending upon who it is and how much they're missing, losing out on class time. I mean, if you had to watch recess every day, but once a week you got out at 2, would it be a fair trade-off? Depends on if you had to watch both recesses, I suppose. But you know, there's going to be times too where if kids are in the room all day, you know, I don't know that second graders always have to have the same time at recess. I think maybe you might want more structured breaks where kids get up and move around a little bit. You might take them a walk around the building or walk here or there and get them outside once in a while. Or maybe when you're doing science, you know, if we can get that hill, if you've looked at that little hill that we've got now, it's got a nice little incline. It's kind of like a little amphitheater that, you know, maybe you want to, when the weather's nice, you want to take your science kids out in the afternoon and you're just going to have class out there for a little bit. I hope we can still I think they should still be able to get access to the internet out there if you're doing like a digital activity. So I think that we're going to try to, you know, in high school kids, if they can't see their friends because they can't eat lunch with them, etc., we might have to allow them to have Zoom chats in study hall, you know, to where they get to interact with some of their friends a little bit, even though they can't sit by them and giggle. We might have to allow opportunities for kids to socialize if we're going to limit their opportunities. And I don't know exactly how that's going to work without getting carried away, but I think that we've got to be a little bit open-minded about some of those things. Did I cover everything here? Kids driving to P2T, possibly. We've allowed kids to do that in the past. Some schools let all their kids do that. We'd have to have something in writing. Remote learning, food pickup. Yeah, we talked about that. Yes, possible. Yeah, on the bus driving to activities, here's a strange thing, but if push comes to shove, if there's spread going on, you know, when I was playing little kid baseball, mom and dad drove me to every game and took me home at every game. And if we played in the right direction, we got Dairy Queen on the way home. I mean, there might be opportunities where there might be situations where we might just have to say, you know, we're going to keep it, you know, take your kid to the game. You can watch the game, but I don't know. I'm not going to rule anything out. I'm not going to say, don't be going around telling everybody that parents got to drive their kid to the game, because I don't know that that's going to happen, but I can see a scenario in which case we might not take this certain group of 5 kids. We might call and say, parents, can you drive them today? You know, not everybody on the team might get to go to all games either by public transportation. They might have to ride with their parents as spectators. If you're not going to play, you don't go. I mean, if it's varsity only, not everybody on the team needs to go. I know that's counter to what coaches like to do, but again, we have to say what is necessary and what is a convenience. And when we're in the green, I look at things a lot differently than when we're in the yellow and the orange. And and there might be, and we have to, and when you're sitting there and you're looking around and see, and I know people are going to say, well, they're not doing this in Wisner and they're not doing this in West Point, but we're not that community. I mean, we have if you happen to be in southern Cumming County where there's been 2 exposures in the last 2 weeks, or if you happen to reside in Thurston County where they had 44 in the last 2 weeks, and we got people in both. And so, you know, we are going to have to make decisions based on that. We're in a unique position that we have, you know, a diverse school community, and we're going to have to look at the entire community and not just what's happening in Cumming County and not just what's happening in Thurston County when we make the decisions, which is going to make it even harder to decide, you know, what the level of spread is, and that's on the health department. But I want to finish up by saying I appreciate everybody's input today. I'm glad that we have parents and staff members in on this. If you've looked at Lincoln Public Schools today, their teachers union has asked for an emergency board meeting because they're upset that teachers were not involved in any part of their return to school planning, and they feel like that some of the decisions were made that did not reflect their concerns. And that's one of the things that I absolutely did not want, was to sit there and make a bunch of decisions without getting input. So though that's the reason we have these. I'm sorry it went so late, but everybody had a chance to throw their questions and answers in. And hopefully we'll make this document a little better so it's easy to understand for folks. I want to keep it short. The Lincoln document's over 100 pages. I think 4 is plenty. I might have to reduce the type per size a little bit, but if we can get it on 4, I like that. So if nothing else, I'm going to turn you guys loose with a thanks, and we will see you next week. Hopefully we got the health department protocols to go over.
Dr. Cerny, I have one question.
Oh, yeah.
Since our district has students from Cumming County and Thurston County, you will be following the recommendations of Cumming County or of Elkhorn Logan Valley, since that is where our physical building is at, correct?
That is what the health, and I've asked both of them, and that's what they've told me.
Okay, perfect.
One talks to the other, and then they talk to me.
Okay, yep, because I know I've had some people ask, what are we going to follow? And I always tell them, we're going to follow Elkhorn Logan Valley because that's the base where our school building is at. So, all right, thank you.
Yep, and I hope that their communication is good. I am a little leery, but they tell me that they talk every day. So I hope so, because communication is going to be important for us. Okay, good night, everybody.